There's a peculiar weight to the air in places where the earth seems to hold its breath, where the line between the natural and the unnatural blurs, where the shadows stretch too long and the silence speaks of things best left undisturbed. My name is Eric Renshaw, and in the summer of 1987, I found myself in the heart of Louisiana's cypress swamps near St. Tammany Parish, a place where the beauty of the bayou hides a darkness that clings to the soul like Spanish moss to a tree. I was 35 years old, a contract forestry surveyor for the state with 7 years of experience under my belt, a man who thought he knew the wilderness, who thought he could walk its paths and emerge unchanged. But the swamp has a way of unraveling you, of peeling back the layers of your certainty until all that's left is raw, primal fear, and the knowledge that some things in this world defy explanation, some things hunger for more than you can give. I'd grown up in the bayous, a kid who'd spent his summers knee-deep in murky water, chasing frogs and dodging alligators, the kind of boy who thought he knew every inch of this land, every sound, every shadow. The job I'd taken as a surveyor was a natural fit, straightforward, unglamorous work that got me out of the office and into the wilderness I'd always loved. Walk the designated tracks, note the health of the trees, identify risks of wildfires or disease, and move on. It was routine, predictable, a way to escape the monotony of city life and reconnect with the land that had shaped me. But on that humid July morning in 1987, as I parked my pickup on the edge of a tract near a place the locals called Dead Man's Hollow, I felt a flicker of unease I couldn't quite place, a sense that the swamp was watching me with eyes I couldn't see, waiting for me to make a mistake. The area was a desolate stretch of beauty, the kind that takes your breath away even as it makes your skin crawl. Towering bald cypresses rose from the water like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting into the mud, their branches draped with Spanish moss that hung like ghostly drapes, swaying in the breeze with a rhythm that felt too deliberate, too alive. The air was thick with humidity, a heavy, oppressive heat that made my shirt cling to my skin before I'd even stepped out of the truck, the scent of decay and wet earth filling my lungs with every breath. The water beneath the trees was a murky mirror, reflecting the dense canopy above in shades of green and brown, its surface rippling with the occasional movement of a fish or something else, something I couldn't quite name but felt in my gut, a presence that lingered just out of sight. Dead Man's Hollow had a reputation, the kind of name that sounded dramatic, a flourish from the old-timers who loved to spin tales over beers at the local bar. I'd mentioned the area to a few folks earlier that week, and their reactions had been peculiar. Half disbelief, half pity, their eyes darting away as if they didn't want to speak the truth aloud. One man, an old fisherman with a face like weathered leather, had muttered something about the area not being fit for trespassing. His voice low and gravelly, his hands trembling as he gripped his coffee mug. I'd laughed it off, chalking it up to superstition, the kind of folklore that thrives in places like this, where the land itself feels alive with secrets. But as I stood there, staring into the swamp, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something to those warnings, something I'd ignored at my own peril. My partner for the day, Troy Winslow, arrived shortly after me, his beat-up Chevy kicking up dust as he pulled up beside my truck. Troy was a wiry guy in his late 20s, with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a tendency to narrate every move he made, a habit that was both endearing and infuriating depending on the day. He was new to the department, assigned to shadow me as part of his onboarding, and he cracked a joke about the swamp smelling worse than his ex-wife's cooking as he climbed out of his truck, a grin on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. I forced a smile, appreciating the company. Solo surveys could feel endless, the silence stretching on for hours, broken only by the buzz of cicadas and the occasional splash of something in the water. But I couldn't shake the unease that had settled into my bones, a feeling that this day would be anything but routine. We started on the southern edge of the tract, marking our path with orange flagging tape as we went, the air buzzing with the sound of cicadas, their song a constant hum that seemed to vibrate through the swamp, a chorus that felt both alive and oppressive. The ground was soft underfoot, the mud sucking at our boots with every step, the water beneath the trees reflecting the dense canopy above in a way that made the world feel inverted, as if we were walking on the surface of a mirror, the sky below us, the trees above. By noon, we'd cataloged several dead cypress stands, their trunks gray and lifeless, their branches bare, and noted areas where invasive plants were choking out the native species, their vines twisting around the trees like a strangler's hands, a slow, silent murder that spoke of the swamp's relentless hunger. The work was monotonous, the kind I could do without much thought, my hands moving on autopilot as I marked trees and jotted notes in my logbook, my mind drifting to the stories I'd heard as a kid, tales of the rougarou, a wolf-like creature that hunted those who broke the rules, and the fifilet, a ghostly light that led travelers to their doom. I'd always dismissed them as folklore, the kind of stories meant to scare children into behaving, but there was something about the swamp that day, something in the air, in the silence between the cicadas' song, that made those stories feel too real, too close. Troy stopped mid-step ahead of me, his hand raised, his body tense as he turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his eyes darting to the trees, searching for something I couldn't see. I listened, straining to pick up anything over the hum of the swamp, and there it was, a faint rhythmic thumping, almost like a distant drumbeat, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a pulse that echoed through the trees with a regularity that sent a chill down my spine. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady, and told him it was probably some old pump from the oil fields farther out, a logical explanation that felt hollow even as I said it. Troy didn't look convinced, his brow furrowed, his hands tightening around his survey rod, but he kept walking, his steps more cautious now, his eyes scanning the swamp with a wariness I hadn't seen in him before. The sound grew louder as we moved deeper into the tract, now unmistakable as a steady pounding, like someone driving a massive stake into the ground, a rhythm that felt unnatural, deliberate, a message I couldn't decipher but could feel in my bones. We paused again, the cicadas' song fading into the background, replaced by an absence that was more unsettling than the noise itself. No bird calls, no rustling of leaves, just a vacuum of sound that pressed in around us, a silence that felt alive, watchful, waiting. Troy suggested we veer west, closer to the designated boundary of our survey area, a move that would keep us out of Dead Man's Hollow itself, but the terrain was starting to blur the lines on our maps, the swamp swallowing the landmarks we'd relied on, making everything look the same. A labyrinth of trees and water that seemed to shift and change with every step. The drumming noise faded as we changed direction, a relief that should have eased the tension in my chest but didn't, the silence sticking with us like a shadow, a weight that made every step feel heavier, every breath harder to draw. We stopped for a late lunch on a dry patch of ground, a small island of stability in the sea of mud and water, Troy unpacking a sandwich while I jotted notes in my logbook, trying to focus on the mundane, to anchor myself in the routine. That's when we heard it. A scream, sharp and guttural, cutting through the swamp like a blade. A sound that froze both of us in place, our bodies tensing, our eyes meeting in a shared moment of dread. Troy muttered something about it being a gator's mating call, his voice trembling, his hands shaking as he rewrapped his sandwich, but we both knew that wasn't it. The sound too human, too raw, too full of terror to be anything but a cry for help or a warning. We debated heading back to the truck, the sensible choice, the safe choice, but protocol dictated that we investigate if someone was hurt, that we couldn't just leave them to whatever fate the swamp had in store. I radioed the department's dispatch, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat, letting them know we were investigating a potential emergency. Their response staticky but acknowledging, a lifeline that felt tenuous at best. We headed in the direction of the scream, our steps cautious, our eyes scanning the swamp for any sign of movement, any clue to what had made that sound. The first thing we found was a boot, half submerged in the mud, its laces torn clean through, as if it had been yanked off in a hurry, a sign of panic that sent a chill down my spine. A little farther on, we found another, its leather scuffed and soaked, abandoned in the muck like a breadcrumb leading us deeper into the swamp, deeper into the unknown. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that maybe someone had gotten disoriented, lost their footing, and decided to abandon their boots, a desperate bid for freedom. But the explanation felt hollow, the alternative too terrible to contemplate. The ground turned wetter as we pressed on, the mud sucking at our boots with a hunger that felt personal, the smell of rot becoming overwhelming, a rancid stench that clung to the air, making Troy gag, my own stomach churning as I fought the urge to retch. Then we saw it. A pile of torn clothing, scraps really tangled in the roots of a cypress tree, smeared with a dark, sticky substance that could only be blood. The pieces arranged almost deliberately, as if they'd been dragged there. A message written in the language of violence. A message I couldn't read but could feel in my gut. A warning that we were not alone, that we were being watched. Troy started swearing under his breath, his voice trembling, his hands clutching his survey rod like a weapon. But I shushed him, the silence returning, that oppressive void that made every step feel louder than it should, every breath a betrayal of our presence. I scanned the area, my heart pounding, my eyes searching for any sign of movement, and that's when I saw the footprints, enormous, with long, claw-like impressions at the tips, their shapes reminding me of a bear's tracks but elongated, misshapen, warped in a way that spoke of something unnatural, something that didn't belong in the world I knew. Whatever had made them had been dragging something heavy, the disturbed mud trailing alongside the prints, a path of destruction that led deeper into the swamp, deeper into Dead Man's Hollow. Troy wanted to leave, his face pale, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen in him before, and I didn't blame him, the primal urge to run clawing at my own chest. But I radioed dispatch again, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat, only to be met with static, the connection that had worked fine earlier now severed, a lifeline cut by the swamp itself. I told Troy we'd follow the tracks a little farther, just to confirm it wasn't some kind of hoax, a decision that felt reckless even as I made it, but the need to know, to understand, overrode the fear, a compulsion I couldn't shake. He looked at me like I was insane, his mouth opening to protest, but he didn't argue, his steps reluctant as he followed me, his body tense, his eyes darting to the trees, searching for something he couldn't name but could feel, a presence that lingered just out of sight. The tracks led us to a clearing, a patch of dry ground surrounded by towering cypresses, their branches forming a suffocating canopy that blocked out the sun, casting the area in a perpetual twilight, a place where the light seemed to die, swallowed by the darkness of the swamp. At the center of the clearing was what could only be described as a crude nest, a grotesque structure made of branches, mud, and bones. Animal bones mostly, their shapes cracked and gnawed, but some were unmistakably human, their curves too familiar, too horrifying to ignore. The stench was overwhelming, a metallic, decayed odor that stung the nose, a scent that spoke of death and decay, of a hunger that knew no bounds, a purpose I couldn't comprehend but could feel in my bones, a purpose that was deliberate, constructed, a monument to something ancient, something malevolent. A snapping branch to our right made both of us spin around, our bodies tensing, our breaths catching in our throats as we searched the shadows for the source of the sound. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, the swamp's oppressive atmosphere conjuring phantoms from the darkness. But then I saw it, partially obscured by the trees, a massive figure, easily 8 feet tall, with hunched shoulders and limbs that looked too long for its body, its skin rough and patchy, covered in a mangy layer of fur that glistened with moisture, its head elongated, grotesque, with a jaw that hung slightly open, revealing rows of jagged teeth, a wolf-like shape that was all wrong, a nightmare made flesh. It moved with a strange, jerking gait, as if it wasn't used to being watched, its movements deliberate, predatory, a hunter that knew its prey was near. Troy panicked, his body tensing as he bolted, crashing through the underbrush, his shouts echoing through the swamp, a desperate plea for escape that shattered the silence, drawing the creature's attention like a beacon. I called after him, my voice hoarse, my heart pounding, but he was already gone, swallowed by the trees, his footsteps fading into the distance. The creature's head snapped in his direction, its glowing eyes narrowing, and it moved faster than anything that size should be able to, its limbs jerking in unnatural motions, its body a blur of shadow and fur as it gave chase, a predator on the hunt, a force I couldn't stop. I didn't think, I just ran after them, adrenaline pushing me past the point of fear, my legs burning, my lungs screaming as I crashed through the swamp, branches clawing at my face, the mud sucking at my boots, the air thick with the scent of decay and terror. I could hear Troy's shouts ahead, the sound of something heavy barreling through the swamp behind him, a relentless pursuit that spoke of hunger, of intent, of a darkness that wouldn't be denied. Then came a strangled cry, a sound that cut off too abruptly, a silence that was worse than any scream, a silence that told me I was too late, that the swamp had claimed its prize. When I found him, Troy was slumped against a tree, his chest torn open, his body limp, his eyes staring blankly at the sky, a pool of blood beneath him, the ground soaked with his life, a testament to the violence that had unfolded, a violence I couldn't comprehend but could feel in the air, a weight that pressed down on me, suffocating me with its intensity. The creature stood over him, its massive form hunched, its head cocked in an almost curious manner, sniffing at the air as if savoring the scent of death, its glowing eyes unblinking, its presence a violation of everything I thought I knew about the world. I stepped back, my boots snapping a twig, the sound echoing through the swamp like a gunshot, and the creature's head whipped around to face me, its gaze locking onto mine, a stare that pierced through me, filling me with a terror I'd never known, a primal fear that stripped away the layers of my humanity, leaving me raw and exposed, a prey animal in the presence of a predator. It let out a low rumble, more like a snort than a roar, a sound that vibrated through the air, a warning that spoke of hunger, of intent, of a darkness that wouldn't be sated. My hand went to my belt, but I remembered too late that I'd left my pistol in the truck. A stupid mistake that left me defenseless, vulnerable, a man with nothing but a branch to protect him from a nightmare. I grabbed the branch, holding it in front of me like a shield, a futile gesture against a creature that towered over me, its limbs twitching with anticipation, its claws glinting in the dim light, a promise of violence, of pain, of a hunger that knew no bounds. It took a step closer, then another, its movements deliberate, its eyes never leaving mine, and I felt my legs turn to lead, my body frozen, my mind screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, anything to survive. Instinct kicked in, and I threw the branch as hard as I could, hitting it square in the face, a desperate act that made it flinch, just enough for me to turn and sprint, my legs pumping, my heart pounding, my only thought to reach the truck, to escape the nightmare that had claimed Troy, that wanted to claim me. The swamp seemed to stretch endlessly, every tree looking the same as the last, a labyrinth of shadows and water that swallowed my footsteps, the mud clinging to me like it wanted to pull me under, to keep me in its embrace, to make me part of its darkness. I could hear the creature behind me, crashing through the brush, its guttural breathing getting closer, its presence a weight that pressed down on me, a shadow I couldn't outrun. I stumbled and fell more times than I could count, the mud coating my hands, my face, my clothes, a baptism in the swamp's hunger, a ritual I couldn't escape. My lungs burned, my legs felt like they were giving out, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. The image of Troy's lifeless body burned into my mind, a warning of what awaited me if I faltered. When I finally broke through the tree line and saw my truck, it was like seeing salvation itself, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a chance to escape the nightmare that had unfolded. I threw open the door, slammed it shut, and locked it in one motion, my hands trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fumbled for the keys, the engine roaring to life with a sound that felt like a victory, a defiance against the swamp's hunger. The creature emerged from the trees seconds later, its massive form pacing back and forth, its body half-crouched, ready to pounce, its claws glinting in the fading light. A predator denied its prey but not its hunger. It lunged at the truck, its claws scraping against the metal, leaving deep gouges that screamed of its strength, of its rage, of a darkness that wouldn't be denied. I started the engine, the roar startling it just enough for me to peel out of there, mud spraying behind the tires, the truck lurching forward with a force that mirrored my desperation, my need to escape, to survive. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main road, where I flagged down an old sedan with a couple of fishermen inside, their faces a mix of confusion and concern as I tried to explain what had happened, my words tumbling over each other, a frantic plea for help that made me sound like a madman. They offered to call the sheriff's office, but I knew what that would lead to, questions I couldn't answer, a report no one would believe, a truth I couldn't face. Instead, I thanked them and drove straight to the nearest town, my hands still trembling, my mind racing with the image of Troy's lifeless body, of the creature's glowing eyes, of a darkness that lived in the swamp, that hungered for more. The next day, I reported Troy as missing, saying we'd been separated during the survey. A half-truth that felt like a betrayal. A lie I told to protect myself from the questions I couldn't answer, from the truth I couldn't face. Search teams went out, but the swamp has a way of swallowing things, and they didn't find much. Just some shredded clothing and a few scattered bones. A testament to the violence that had unfolded. A violence that was written off as a gator attack. A convenient lie that did nothing to ease the guilt that gnawed at me. The guilt of running, of surviving, of leaving Troy to the swamp's hunger. The sheriff knew there was more to it. His eyes lingering on the claw marks on my truck, on the look in my eyes when I tried to explain. But he didn't press, didn't ask the questions I couldn't answer, didn't force me to face the truth of what I'd seen. I haven't been back to Dead Man's Hollow since, and I don't plan to. The swamp, a place of nightmares. A place where the darkness lives, where the creature waits, building its nest, hungering for the next unlucky soul to cross its path. I make sure I'm never unarmed now, a lesson learned in blood, a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. A reminder that some days start like any other, but some days end in terror, in a truth that changes you forever. But my story is just one thread in a larger tapestry of horror, a pattern of darkness that stretches across the wilderness, connecting the swamps of Louisiana to the forests of Montana, Pennsylvania, and beyond. A narrative of terror that speaks of creatures and men who hunger for more than we can give, who live in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. There was Everett Calhoun, a private investigator in the Bitterroot Range of western Montana in 2003. A man who thought he knew how to find the lost, how to solve the unsolvable, until he stumbled across the pale walker, a creature with mottled, birch-like skin and needle-like teeth. Its limbs grotesquely thin, its movements jerky, a nightmare that tore through his illusions, leaving him scarred, haunted, a man who learned that some things in the forest punish those who trespass, who disrespect the land. Everett had been searching for Rosalie Dupré, a young woman who'd vanished while camping with friends. Her boot the first clue in a trail of terror that led him to a campsite littered with the remains of a deer, its head severed clean. A sign of something that hunted for more than food, something that left its mark on the forest, on Everett, on the world he thought he knew. The pale walker found him by the lake, its lipless mouth stretching across its face in a jagged line, its gaze unblinking, a stare that spoke of hunger, of intent, of a darkness that wouldn't be denied. Everett fought, his knife slashing through the creature's arm, but it didn't flinch, its scream a high-pitched keening that made his ears ring, his vision blur, a sound that spoke of something ancient, something that lived in the shadows of the Bitterroot Range, waiting for its next victim. And then there was Warren Cale in 2008, in the Allegheny National Forest of Pennsylvania, a man who thought he could find Samantha Connors, a hiker who'd vanished with her boyfriend, their bodies torn apart by a creature with antlers and jagged claws, its torso broad and hunched, its mouth a mockery of a grin, a nightmare that left its mark on the forest, on Warren, on the world he thought he knew. The creature hunted him across a ravine, its bone-rattling cry echoing through the trees, a sound that spoke of hunger, of rage, of a darkness that wouldn't be denied, a darkness that left Samantha's body in a cave, her face frozen in terror, her hands clutching a rock stained with the creature's blood, a testament to her fight, to her defiance, to a truth that Warren would carry with him forever. These stories, these fragments of terror, are a reminder that the wilderness isn't just a place of beauty, of peace. It's a place of secrets, of shadows that stretch too long, of whispers that carry the weight of centuries, of hungers that don't die, that don't forget. They're a reminder of the stories we've forgotten, the tales our ancestors told around campfires, stories of creatures that live in the spaces between, that feed on fear, on despair, on the things we leave behind. They're a reminder that the swamp, the forest, the wilderness has a memory, a history that stretches back to a time before us, a time when the world was wilder, darker, a time when the things that lived in the shadows were more than just stories, more than just myths, more than just nightmares. I walk away different, haunted, the kind of haunted that doesn't fade with time, that lingers in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths, a shadow that follows me wherever I go. I never believed in monsters, in the things that go bump in the night, but now I know better. Now I've seen the truth, felt its weight, heard its guttural breathing in the dark. A call to the darkness that lives in us all. A darkness that waits for us to listen, that waits for us to answer. I think about that summer often, about the swamp in Dead Man's Hollow, about the creature with its glowing eyes and jagged teeth, about the way it looked at me, the way it knew my name, the way it marked me. I think about the others, the ones who came after me, the ones who faced their own horrors, their own nightmares, their own truths. Their stories a haunting refrain that follows me even now, years later. A reminder that some places are inherently dark, imbued with a malevolence that defies explanation. A hunger that can't be sated, a memory that doesn't forget. What about you? If you were standing in that swamp, the air thick with the scent of decay, the silence broken by the rhythmic thumping of something ancient, something hungry, would you dare to follow the tracks, to face the creature in its nest, armed with nothing but a branch and a fading hope, knowing that the swamp remembers, that the swamp hungers, that the swamp waits? Or would you turn back, run for the safety of your truck, and pray you never hear that guttural breathing again, knowing that some truths are better left buried, some mysteries better left unsolved? The wilderness is always waiting. Its whispers a haunting refrain, a call to the unknown that never truly fades, a reminder that terror can find you, even in the places you thought were safe.